A guy wanted to sue God because it was unfair to blame the rest of us for Adam's poor choice. This guy murdered his father, then during the trial he sent death threats to his mother. So this guy ordered a pizza. Nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done under 30 minutes, but the guy assumed it because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later, and to apologize even if it wasn't necessary, they brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he is Hindu, doesn't eat beef, and apparently felt offended. Also, this one time this dude wanted us to sue his neighbor because he assumed the guy was practicing black magic. A friend of mine was in a case where a guy was accused for graffiti vandalism, among other things, and the conversation with the judge went like this. Judge: sir, did you make this graffiti? Defendant: no, I did not. Judge: but it has your signature at the end. Defendant: yes, an artist has to sign his work. Case closed. Probably my client charged with statutory rape, multiple counts, who impregnated his high school sweetheart's daughter after having sex with said daughter from the ages of 13 to 15. He was 35 at the time of the birth. DNA in the form of a baby is strong evidence for the state. Worked in-house for a famous character company with a large fan base. A few crazies a year call in. A guy called in claiming that we stole characters that he created and demanded to be compensated. I calmly asked them to provide more details so I can determine whether this has any merit to it. He states he designed the characters himself and gave it to the well-known actual creator when he was a kid, and the creator pawned them off as his own. I asked him when he was born, and it's a good 20 years after these characters were actually created. I ask him to explain this, and he pivots and says he also created some other well-known famous characters and brands. Characters and brands that are not owned by my company. I kindly ask that if he wants to pursue anything to send us something in writing and hang up. I figured if he wasn't going to do some really basic research on his own claim, he wasn't going to spend any time to write it up. Never heard from him again. Not my client, but my dad, and the hospital he worked at, was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Details: patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that, or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery, performs it successfully. Hooray. The patient's husband is quite devout and beyond pissed that his wife can't have any more kids. So he sued the hospital. No firm would represent him, and he ended up bringing proceedings himself. Went all the way to trial and he lost hard. My dad had a client who was on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. Guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook holding guns, drugs, and cash, and had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun as well as selling crack on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling the genius he was going to prison either way and to plead out for a reduced sentence, dude still pleaded not guilty. We still occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. I read about a guy who tried to sue the devil for making him commit crimes. The judge threw it out when the man couldn't prove the devil lived in the judge's jurisdiction. Not a lawyer. I was a jailer and used to pull double duty as a bailiff. A guy stole a pickup truck and was later captured passed out behind the wheel parked on a sidewalk surrounded by a ludicrous amount of drugs and guns. His legal defense: he elected to represent himself because he wasn't done being stupid. Double jeopardy. You can't charge me for theft, drugs, and felon in possession of a weapon because I've already been convicted all of those charges before. In short, during his jury trial he admitted to doing it but explained with a smug grin that since he had already done time for the same charges from another case before that he could not be prosecuted for them ever again. This is not how double jeopardy works, folks. He's in prison for 20 years now. If he'd taken legal counsel he could have easily cut a deal for 5. I was in a car accident when I was 16. It was totally my fault. It was summer and it had rained for the first time in a while, so the streets were really slippery. I was going around a 90-degree curve and slid slightly over the center line because I hit my brakes. I was going somewhere between 15-20 miles per hour. I hit the front side of the oncoming car with the front side of my car. There was very little damage done to either vehicle and the police did not ticket me, she sued. First, she tried to sue my parents since my insurance was on their policy, but that got thrown out. Then she sued me. My insurance company provided my lawyer, who was a very detailed, thorough guy as far as I could tell. They tried several times to settle with her, but she refused. By the time this went to court, I had just turned 18. I literally had to sit at the defendant's table all day. I shit you not. The woman I hit claimed she was injured in the accident and could no longer feel her pinky toe. Her lawyer showed up late, looking like Chris Farley when he slept in a van down by the river. His suit jacket looked like it had been wadded up somewhere. This woman went to all the doctors she could and every doctor's notes presented by her said she claims she can't feel her pinky toe. But testing shows no issues. She claimed emotional duress because she could only wear sneakers because of her injury. She limped around in the courthouse, but I happened to see her out the window during the lunch break and she literally sprinted to her car. While I sat at the defendant's table on trial all day, I saw several jurors sleeping and the foreman using a rolled up piece of paper like a telescope to look around the courtroom while someone was testifying. The judge instructed the jury to not take insurance into account, i.e. they were not allowed to know if I had insurance and were not allowed to assume I did. They just looked at me, a scared 18-year-old, and decided that this woman's pinky toe claim was worth $250,000. Her lawyer was shocked. That was the day I completely lost faith in our justice system. Worked in family law in California for like 2 years before deciding I'd bang myself if I didn't change career paths. In CA, the obligation to pay spousal support, alimony, ends when the recipient begins cohabitation with a new romantic partner. A guy who was positively getting fucked in half in his monthly payments came to the office and said he was aware of the rule about cohabitation and wanted me to argue his point in court. You see, his ex was a narcissist she was in love with and had begun cohabitation with herself. Her presence in her apartment should count the same as if there were a romantic partner there. He was bordering on begging me to take his money. I refused. Not a lawyer, but I was a witness to an assault a few years back. Had to get up in the box and be questioned. Terrifying. Anyway, it was on a night out, hanging around outside a club. A female friend of mine took exception to some dude grabbing her ass. Both start slinging insults at each other until the guy decides to sling his fist at her face instead, right in the presence of 3 police officers, who witnessed the whole thing and arrested him immediately. The guy for some reason denied it all, despite being caught literally red-handed by the popo, and it had to be resolved in court. How would you even argue on his behalf? Please subscribe, comment and like. What are you waiting for? Just do it. Subscribe. Should I repeat? No? Well, I'll repeat anyways. Subscribe.